Hello, all. Thank you so much for joining us for our Study and Go Abroad panel today. We're joined by Liliana Moratis and Cassia Simons here. We'll do some quick intros, but thanks again. The idea today is do an informal roundtable around studying abroad, right? Canadian students leaving Canada for a full semester maybe, or perhaps a full degree. And sort of the things that they need to know and prepare for. So for myself, my name is Logan. I'm here with CCUF. I'll be sort of moderating the session, asking a few questions and monitoring the chat. Feel free to submit any questions or comments that you might have, and we'll try to address them at the end in a bit of a Q&A session. But before we dive too far in, let's do a couple of intros. Liliana, do you want to start us off, please?
Sure, thank you. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Liliana Morachis. I work for Arizona State University, ASU. I'm the International Admissions Coordinator, and I am the representative for Canada. So if you have any questions or after this, if you want to follow up, I will be your point of contact.
Hello, I'm Kasia from the University of Sussex in the UK. Again, like Liliana, I'm the International Officer for North America, so I'm responsible for welcoming our Canadian students to the university and overseeing their process to the university. I also studied abroad as part of my degree at Sussex, so this is something I'm very passionate and interested about. I think it's a really enriching opportunity for students. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you about it.
Great. Thank you very much, folks, for that intro. Kasia, I think we'll start with you then for this first topic. Because you have the personal experience, you can tell us, why do students choose to study abroad? Like, what are the advantages and what do students hope to get out of it?
Yeah, so it depends what they're looking at. If they're looking for a semester or a year abroad, it's usually something fairly short term, but they're going to add an international flavour to their degree. It might be that they're studying a major in languages, or it may be something more internationally focused that's going to give them relevant experience in that as well. I find... Well, my experience was that a semester probably isn't enough, that actually, if you're going to do it, you might as well do the year. You just about get yourself settled in the first semester, and then the second one, you're like, okay, yeah, I've got this, so we're good to go. For me, it was an integrated part of my degree at Sussex. Obviously, they weren't going to force me to go, but it really was a chance to push myself outside of my boundaries, learn a new culture as well. I think students thinking about studying their whole degree abroad, there's different benefits that come with it. There's obviously those sort of themes as well as the short-term study abroad. But for a lot of people, particularly if they're looking across the pond, you're looking at shorter degrees, pretty competitive tuition, those kinds of things as well. So those things can come into play with it too.
Sorry, folks, couple of connectivity issues. Thanks, Kasia, for those comments. Liliana, how about yourself? Is a single semester enough from your perspective? Is the full year a better choice? What do you think?
I'm going to agree with Kasia. It's never enough. After you try it for a little bit, you want to keep going. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I myself also did 5 times I went abroad. And one was in Canada, actually. It was in Toronto. Best experience of my life. And I think that some of the things that the students are looking for is, have a different mindset, getting to know people from around the world, even the way that we have our classes set up, and it depends of the experience that you want. I totally agree. If you want a semester, if you want to have your whole degree, maybe the university that you're looking into has a program that is not in your home country, and that will be also an advantage. Or reasons why a student will go abroad. But definitely, if you're thinking about having, even if it's just a summer, I will encourage you to go ahead and do it, because you will be addicted, as we are, to studying abroad.
How about pitfalls, drawbacks, risks? What do you see as something to watch out for, Liliana?
Well, anytime that you go outside of your comfort zone, yes, there are some risks that you need to consider. But of course, if you practice, like common sense safety, you will be fine. But other than that, I think it's more of the opportunity about learning how to solve different problems, of how you connect with somebody else outside of your comfort zone and your bubble. So there are more advantages than definitely than disadvantages.
So please feel free to use the.
That's what I will say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like the advantages definitely outweigh the disadvantages for sure. Obviously, financial aspects can always come into I would say the downside, but they are often a major deciding factor for students as to whether it is a viable option for them. And there's natural things that will come into play, like homesickness, being very daunted about the prospects of things but I think they very much get outweighed by the benefits and the enjoyment for the student of being overseas.
And if I add something, when you talk about the financial aspects, nowadays there are so many scholarships that are offered in every university to study abroad. So it's not as difficult as it was 20 years ago, definitely, because now you have so many options and opportunities that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Kasia, you mentioned, of course, finances being the biggest, probably in most cases, the biggest challenge and the biggest deciding factor. Do you have any advice for how students can help to cover the costs, given it generally is a more expensive proposition to study abroad than remaining domestic? Any advice?
Yeah, so again, and it depends what we're looking at. Are we looking at a year? Are we looking at a semester? Or are we looking at the full degree overseas? If students are pretty sure they want to do, they decided they're going to stay in Canada and then go to France for a year abroad or whatever, or a semester, and they know they want to do that fairly, or that's going to be something they want to do, then start budgeting for it as soon as possible. That's really good advice that I can give. And maybe make sure those summer earnings and things like that go into a savings account rather than in H&M or something. That's always good. I think look at the funding options at both the inbound university and the outbound, so the one that you're leaving and also the one you're going into, to see with that. And also some common sense stuff, right? Like look at the dorms that you might be staying in, or like the options that you have. Like don't necessarily have to go for the most expensive one, and like the savings you can make as well. If you're considering international for the whole degree, yes, it is going to be a bigger financial burden, but it's kind of weighing the benefits of it. At Sussex, we see a lot of Canadian students joining us for law, and they can do that straight out of high school. So actually, yes, the international tuition is probably more, but actually in the long run, it probably balances out and they get into industry a lot quicker. So it's looking at the long-term plan with it, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've definitely heard that about law in the UK, that it draws a lot of Canadian students because you can.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, Liliana, from your perspective and maybe a more USA-centric perspective, any advice, thoughts on how students can help to cover some of the costs?
Sure, there are so many options. First of all, even though you're an international student, there are many universities like ours that offer scholarships for international students to help them cover the cost. And you may consider, and this is if you want to do your whole degree here with us, you may consider also some working opportunities that we have, even if you're on a student visa. Of course, there are some restrictions, but that's something that you can also think about it. And sometimes students think that that if they start already with a scholarship, that's the way that it's going to end, and it's not true. I mean, they can find more other different types of scholarships all around, and even in the second year, third year. So there are a lot of opportunities, and they're just waiting for somebody to sign up, and that's money that they could have. On the other hand, if it's a short stay, I totally agree. There are many ways, especially if you you know that you're going to do a stay in the next 2 years, hey, start your savings account. I don't know, is it your birthday, Christmas, or any celebration that you have? Ask for money. Ask your, people that you know for money instead of something, and start saving. And that's a good way that you can start having a little bit on your own, and then with the support from the school, you can make it happen.
I'd also, can I just add actually one thing that I forgot to mention is looking at the funding options that are domestic. So particularly in Canada, for those who are in Ontario, for example, the federal portion of OSAP can be used, I know in the UK, to assist with your studies overseas. I don't know about the US, but I feel like the nodding is saying yes. So like looking at those options within your province from governments, and external funding options as well for it too.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I want to circle back to something Liliana had mentioned, working as an international student. There are restrictions. Here in Canada, we've just recently removed a lot of those restrictions on our international students, but this is like brand new legislation. Prior to that, it was about 20 hours per week. Is that more or less the same in the States? And does that vary by state?
Correct. Well, yes, in general, it's 20 hours per week, and the work will be at the university. Now, the advantages is that while you're working with us, you can be working on your department, you can be doing research, something that you like, and that it's especially in your area. So that will help. Another thing to consider is that because I'm pretty sure we have many US citizens living right now in Canada and they want to study here, they also get some support from the federal government. So we're going to be talking about that in our booth later. But FAFSA, it's a great option if we have any Canadians with double citizenship or US students living right now in Canada and wanted to come back to the United States. Look into that, because that's something that you can add up to any other scholarships.
Cool, that's a nice bonus. Thanks for mentioning that. Kesha, I want to just check in on work restrictions in the UK. Is it sort of the similar idea, 20 hours a week?
20 hours per week, yes, is the limit. You're not restricted to on or off campus, or actually how you use those 20 hours. So you can have 2 jobs that are 10 hours per week, that kind of thing. Also during, you can work on or off campus as well. That's not restricted. And during the breaks, you can work full time, which I think classifies as 40 hours per week. So if you're staying for the winter break, spring, or even, for the longer summer one, you can make that work for you better.
Yeah, and it's probably the same in the States. If you're on a break or a free period, summertime, it's full-time hours. Yeah, cool. It was the same here in Canada until they recently
Well, I think we've got some connectivity issues with Logan at the moment. Maybe we could grab one of the questions in the Q&A whilst that is resolving itself.
Okay.
Sorry, Logan, you had a real delay there. We didn't catch any of that.
Okay, while we wait for Logan, I want to answer. There's a question very specific to the United States here in our Q&A, and it says that Education USA Canada helps Canadian students to navigate banking, healthcare, legal, visa considerations, etc. So yes, I will encourage you to contact Education USA, which is in every consulate and in the embassy, depending where you are. And the idea is that they're going to help Canadian students to navigate the process, as well as finding some information, scholarships, funds, and help you with all the process to get into that's very specific to the United States.
Yeah, for the UK, it will depend on your university that you're applying to as to the sort of support that's available. So there's a version of me in every university in the UK. So you can reach out to them, and we tend to provide a lot of pre-departure support and guidance on the things you need to know in order to make the move successfully. Likewise, most universities in the UK will work with agencies that are based in Canada to provide extra levels of support. It's usually free for the student to use, and they can provide guidance down from the initial application to a university. And this is for full degrees in the UK, all the way through to visa and that kind of thing as well. So they're definitely good resources to look out for.
Correct. And I'm glad that you mentioned that it's free, so
Yeah.
you can take advantage of that.
In fact, if they're charging you, you should probably avoid those ones.
Correct. That's a very good rule of thumb. We also have here a question about scholarships. Definitely, I'm pretty sure we can talk about our particular scholarships, but as a general rule, always ask the university or, even the program that you're interested in, because like I said, there are many scholarship opportunities. I'm pretty sure that in the university that you are applying to, they have for both, either to study completely your degree, and as well, if you want to do some exchange program or something, like an internship or whatever you want to do abroad. I know for sure we do have it, so I'm pretty sure that there are many other opportunities over there. So yes, there are many scholarships.
Yeah. Scholarships are available in the UK as well. I would say in the UK, scholarship culture is not what it is in North America. So you're probably going to have to do a bit more self-funding and make up your tuition and living costs from potentially scholarships, self-funding, loans, that kind of thing, a little bit more. We tend not to offer full rides in the UK. That's not as common. But there's definitely tuition-based scholarships out there. They're usually sort of merit-based more than need-based, I would say, for international students.
And thanks for playing along while I got disconnected there. So sorry. In any case, I appreciate you carrying the torch there. I'm curious, Kasia, when you mentioned merit-based scholarships, we're talking primarily grades? Like, is it generally your GPA that...
Yeah, it is. So obviously it depends if you're applying for a master's or an undergrad, that kind of thing. If it's undergrad, it's going to be your high school performance, and for masters, it will be your previous institution's education, realistically, yes. When we're talking merit-based scholarships, it might be that so I'll give our example, we have 50 awards under the sort of main umbrella scholarship for international students. So, we're probably advising those coming out of Canadian university or Canadian high school, you really need to be hitting like the 90s to be considered for application on that. High 80s, 90s, realistically, because it's that competitive.
Right. I know here in Canada, we see a lot of domestic awards are looking for community service and volunteer sort of stuff is a pretty big factor. Is that less so for you folks in general, more grades focused, less like quantitative or qualitative experience?
Well, there is a great menu of scholarships that students can look for. So definitely, for example, most of the universities, yes, are looking for a merit-based scholarship, but you can actually, and I encourage you, Google, spend some time looking for different scholarships. There are many countries that even sponsor for some studies. I don't know what it is for Canada, but you can also look into that. I always say that there are many scholarships that nobody takes advantage of it, and look for things that you like. If you play an instrument, if you like sports, try to see if there are any other scholarships that could be add to a merit scholarship that we offer. So that's something that I really encourage. I have a friend, a colleague of mine, she's left-handed, and one day she was like, what if there are any scholarships for left-handed people? And guess what, there were. So she was like, and a little here and there all adds up, and it can help you for your tuition.
I love that. I'm always on the lookout for new and interesting and unique scholarships. I've never considered left-handers, but I'll be keeping an eye on see if we can add that. That's great. I've got a couple of more questions. I know we have a couple in the chat too. I'm curious if, in your view, are certain programs maybe more study abroad friendly than others? Kasia, you had mentioned law in the UK, right? Are there other programs that you see a lot of sort of Canadian or North American interest in over others for particular reasons?
So you'll speak to most British universities, and those coming to do full degrees with us will moat from Canada. We're looking at law and physical therapy. Those are the two that are the big ticket items for us. Now at Sussex, we don't offer physical therapy. So law, we have about 90% of our Canadian students will come and study law with us. And it's because it's a quicker process, right? It's more beneficial. We're both common law countries, and it makes it much quicker for students and largely easier and probably as cheap to do it as it would at home. In terms of study abroad on the short term, actually that's more diverse entirely. Probably because we're looking at a wider background. We're also a comprehensive university, so we have a lot of, I guess, malleable options when it comes to their home institution and coming to us. So that is definitely more flexible. For example, when I went and studied abroad, I had to do stuff related to my degree back at home, but it wasn't credit bear or substantially credit bearing. So I had a bit more flexibility in that sense. But yeah, it will. So yes, for full degrees, very much focused. And you'll find for British universities as well, like if they've got particular expertise in the area, will tend to draw most of the international students, or a good chunk of the international students from around the world to that. But shorter term, it's across the board.
Makes sense. Do you see more or less the same thing, Liliana? Is there one or two programs that people flock to again and again, or is it more sort of diverse?
It is very diverse, but for example, in our university, I know that we have a lot of engineering programs, computer science, cybersecurity, business, especially because of the opportunities as a graduate students that you will get. But there's no like a cookie cutter, like these are the ones. It's very diverse. Also, it depends on the labs that some of the schools are going to offer, etc. And if there are any junior students or in the 11th grade here listening to us, maybe you also want to look at, as many universities offer programs during the summer, kind of have a little taste of what university looks like. You can also take advantage of that right now and start your international experience, and that way you get to know some of the universities, you can get to know a little bit about the programs, and it's always like, yes, this is definitely what I want to do, or maybe it will be like, I think that in the wrong in the wrong major, I'm going to change. But if somebody right now here, like I said, it's a junior, also look into opportunities during the summer to get to know more the programs and the universities and the country that you want to study.
Sure. Appreciate that. Interesting to see the sort of similarities and differences. We've got just a couple of more minutes. I know we have a couple questions in the chat. My last question for you folks is, counselors we're speaking to, right? When a student comes to their counselor and says, hey, I'm thinking about studying abroad, like what would you tell them? What would be your first sort of line of defense? What should a guidance counselor advise a student to do?
Liliana, you go ahead.
Okay, well, definitely it's more through that conversation, like when a student comes to us, especially before I was a high school student, well, when they want that opportunity, you have to look into what is the program that they're studying, try to help them to make a smart decision, meaning, is it cost benefit? Is it a program that you want to do? Is it just like you mentioned, 1 year that you want to study abroad, etc. We have to be very clear about the tuition, the cost, how are you going to cover that? And of course, if it is the program that you really want to get into it. There are so many tools right now that schools have and that we have that can help a student, define what program or what kind of study they want to do abroad. So I think that I will start by that, to getting to know a little bit more. But definitely, I mean, we encourage our students all the time when they say that they want to go abroad. Yes, go ahead, do it, just because we know how much they're going to benefit from that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is probably a British centered thing as well, is that we would always advise that you can make sure that the students you're working with are meeting the requirements for the degree programs that they might be applying for if they're coming for their whole degree, because British universities tend to have fairly rigid requirements from high school or previous levels of study to be able to be admitted to their degrees. Also looking at the timeline, like everyone's going to have different application deadlines and things that need to be done by a certain time. So making sure that, if you're aware of some students that are thinking more internationally focused, that we're not leaving it until the fall before they start their degree to be having that initial discussion, that actually that's happening probably the year before that even, and so we can start thinking about it. In terms of short-term study abroad, actually as school counsellors, like the best thing that you can do is when you're working with students, I think, is just make sure that the universities that they're looking at domestically have got the options to do study abroad, and looking at what those partners might be as well, if they're in places they might want to go or have good links, that kind of thing. One of the universities I considered in the UK was great for the degree program I wanted to do, but only had 5 study abroad partners for my degree, which didn't give me the sort of flexibility I wanted, whereas Sussex ended up with like over 60, so I got to choose essentially with a bit more. So but in terms of the process ongoing study abroad, that's something that's going to be dealt with in the university, so you don't have to worry about having too much expertise on that.
Appreciate your thoughts, folks. We have just a couple of more minutes here. We've got a few questions I want to try to dive through. We're talking about studying abroad, not necessarily in Canada, so I'm going to skim through a couple. How about, this is a question from a student in Nigeria, it looks like. You had mentioned, Kasia, not so many full ride scholarships. I think that's what this person is looking for, or maybe not necessarily a full ride, but a scholarship that continues to fund year by year. Do you folks offer any programs like that in the UK or in general?
Yeah, so you'll find that if you not typically, but undergraduate scholarships are often will last the duration of your degree. So R1, for example, it's a tuition fee discount, and it's a set amount applicable to each year of study. So that's discounted every year. Obviously, masters in the UK are only 1 year, so any scholarships you get are good for that year, and then you're done anyway. So that's So yes, there are ones that will cover your full length of your degree.
Yeah, Liliana, is it similar for you from your perspective, the US?
Yeah, it depends on the institution that you want to join, but sometimes, like the scholarships could be also applied to all the years. You also have to, maintain a GPA, and there are certain requirements, but yes, for sure. A full ride scholarship, it's very difficult, but there are many scholarships that could help you to cover a good chunk of that tuition.
Yeah, that's what we always want to hear, right? More scholarships better than fewer. We've got a couple questions about IELTS, whether they can be used as criteria for scholarships. I'm going to go ahead and say no, I've never heard of that in my experience. IELTS is sort of separate from typical scholarship qualifications. Does that sound right to you?
Well, I would like to answer that because, right now, of course, you don't need English proficiency test. But in general, for international students that come from non-English speaking countries, they do have to take the IELTS, Duolingo, or a TOEFL. And for us, the scholarships that we offer are merit-based. And if your country is a non-English speaking, we are going to take into consideration the score that you need for IELTS, TOEFL, or Duolingo. And there is a minimum criteria if you're a non-English speaker. There is a minimum criteria to apply for some of the programs. And as well, if you have a very good score, definitely that will be considered also for your scholarship.
Beautiful. Okay, thanks for that context. Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's good to know. about the IELTS thing in particular. Okay, folks, well, we're at the end of our session. Thanks very much for joining us. Feel free to visit both Liliana and Kasia at their booths in the exhibit hall, and otherwise have a great afternoon. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.